Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I want to show you how to make Darkpsy kick and bass. And really I want to do two things with the video. I want to show you just the kick and bass creation process in general. And then I'll also show you how you can recreate kick drums. Now this is the second time for me filming this video. And the reason for that is in the first time when I recorded, I didn't actually record my desktop audio. So originally what I had to do was I actually had to explain how to make this kick drum without having the patch in there. Because as you can see, this is just a sample render of a kick drum. And it says that this is from the Psychedelic Intelligence pack, but I've since replaced this kick with one that I made in Audio Jack kick drum. But you can see the result of that tutorial over here in that I now just have the patch that basically makes this exact kick. So what I'm first going to do is I'm just going to play a bit of the track so that you can hear what the kick and bass is actually doing. And then we'll dive into it a little bit. We'll first look into the individual kick and bass patches. And then I'll also show you how the remaking process works. And then I'll also show you how the remaking process of a kick drum works.
My name's
So as you can hear, a very dark kick and bass that we have over here. Now when it comes to the mix, I'm not entirely happy with it yet. It may still be a little bit too bass heavy right now. But as you can see, I'm still working on the production. So throughout the production, I'm just going to figure that out. One of the things that I'll quickly say is that for this part, we have been listening to it through a temporary mastering chain. I'll turn that off for the rest of the tutorial so that you'll hear the kick and bass directly. It's basically the same thing, but quieter. And what I'll actually do in the edit is just balance these two out so that you always hear it at the same loudness. But the kick and bass did change a little bit in terms of the tonality because the master chain is doing a little bit of saturation and that kind of stuff. Now diving in, we start off with the kick. And as I said before, this initially was supposed to be a tutorial on how to recreate a kick. But as you can see, we can just go into the patch now because I have it over here. And really when it comes down to the patch itself, it's not really that interesting without this EQ over here. So let's just have a listen to the kick without that EQ. And you can hear that it's a very punchy and a very deep kick, but it's not really that kind of complex, like knocking kick that we like to hear out of Darkpsy. There are some interesting things going on in the patch itself, mainly the fact that we're starting at this very low frequency over here. We never go into the higher frequencies. And the fact that the amplitude envelope over here is almost completely at silence over here, meaning that we are very low in this middle region over here, which you can also see we've tweaked with the EQ a little bit. And then you can see that we're actually boosting up this area over here. You can see it being louder than the actual graph over here. And that is because of this boost. For those that don't know how this plugin works and what you're exactly looking at, make sure that you check out my videos that I did on it, in which I go much more in depth on how this plugin actually works. But for now, what you need to know is that the EQ is not actually being applied to the signal. It is just taking into account when the waveform is generated. So it's saying, okay, if we want to emulate this 1.45 dB boost, we need to make this part of the kick a little bit louder to actually get that boost in our signal. What that means is that this EQ isn't causing any phase shift, and that means that we're basically just designing the kick exactly how I want it to, and we have control over the face over here. One of the things that you'll notice as well is that this track is written in the key of C sharp, but the kick itself actually revolves around F sharp. Now this was basically done by accident in the sense that this plugin opens up around F sharp, at least the particular preset that I have over here, which is where I started this kick drum from. And to be honest, I just like the tonality that we got with F sharp much more than when I actually tuned it to the key of the track. So in C sharp it sounds like this. And it's just way too deep and these lower sub harmonics aren't really going to come through. So if we tune it up, you can hear we get much more power and much more punch out of the lower frequencies. Now, as you can see, I'm using the kick in audio format. That is just so that I can add fades or reverse kicks or whatever I need to. And as I said before, the EQ is really key to getting this kick to work in the track. We're mainly adding more punch to the lower mids over here at around 100 Hz. And then we're looking for some sharp tonality, and that is what this higher filter is for. So this kind of smiley face kind of look is really what brings out the main two frequencies that we want in the kick. And we're ducking the stuff in between. And that is really something interesting that I hear in a lot of Darkpsy, in that the mid-range around 500 Hz is very low in terms of the frequency. As I said, this mix isn't finalized whatsoever, but if we go to a busy part of the track, what you'll notice on the spectrum is that there's still like a high frequency area and then a low frequency area, and there's less stuff in between. You can see that this track is very bass heavy. As I said, I'm not entirely happy with it yet. I'm not entirely happy with the mix yet. So this might flatten out a little bit more, but you can see the idea of that we're going down and then almost looks like we're going back up again. And that's because there's the main click of the kick is kind of over here, which you'll see if I go back into the kick and actually open that up as a spectrum. You can basically see that our kick is going like this and then back up again. And that is what is bringing out that very strong knocking transient. You can hear without that higher filter that it's just a simple click. Anyway, let's talk about the bass for a little bit. If we load up the bass patch, what you'll see is that it's just a very simple serum bass. What you'll find is that I'm using one of the wavetables for my bass tables pack. This is the default flip alt -100 1 kHz 8 over here. And that probably doesn't really mean much to you. It doesn't really have to. All that you need to know is that all of the processing is already captured in this waveform over here. So there isn't actually any phase shifting happening over here, apart from obviously what the EQ is doing, but that is so small that it doesn't really count as actual processing of the kick and bass. You know how you normally use the multibands to set the crossover filters exactly right to get the right phase shift that you want? All of that is already happening in the bass patch itself. Now again, a very classical setup for that is that we have our sub bass separated. As you can see, the lowest harmonic over here is missing, and we're just using this analog dB sine over here to emulate that. Both of them are going through a filter over here. To be honest, the sub bass doesn't really need to, but initially this was a little bit of a different preset. In that older preset, I wasn't actually separating the sub bass, and I was just using from my wavetables pack the freeform saw processing normalized wavetable, which has been my standard wavetable for a very, very long time. But now, as I said, I'm using the bass tables wavetable over here, and we have separated the sub bass, which means that we have individual volume control over the higher harmonics versus the sub bass. And you'll see that the sub bass is basically coming in a little bit later, which is emulating that more than 180 degrees phase shift that you're often going to get from multiband processing. What you'll see for the bassline is that there's no effects, and the only modulations of interest are the macro over here going to the filter cutoff just to add some extra tone to it if it opens up, and the fact that we're using velocity control to modulate the volume. Of course, indirectly because it's set to the aux source of these LFOs over here, but these LFOs control the volume, and this is just the percentage of the highest amounts that we set over here. So just quickly, let's have a look at the kick and bass. I want to show you what it should probably look like. Let's have a listen to it cleanly here. When it comes to the kick and bass inside of Darkpsy, what you'll see is that the bass notes are a lot quieter than the kick itself. Of course, there is also a bass note playing over here, but these two are just summing together, which you can see over here. In this particular case, I would argue that maybe the velocity could be a little bit lower with the new kick sample that we have over here. That's one of the things that I didn't change when I upgraded the kick and bass of this particular project, because originally this project did have another kick and bass in it. Now, one of the things that you may have noticed when it comes to this kick and bass is that it's doing a lot of interesting stuff, especially in the beginning yet, which is where I have implemented the most, in that there's a lot of different variations and a lot of different glitches and that kind of stuff. And this is really where you get to make your kick and bass shine if you do all of these kind of things. And the way that I'm doing that is mainly through the modulations and automations and melody on the bass line. You can see we have our main macro over here, which is constantly opening up and closing. We have our stereo generation over here, which sometimes enables. The stereo generations is these two over here. So this is the total amount of spread, and this is the saturation that is happening on the stereo signal. And then finally over here we have our filter control. This is just to make sure that over here the kick and bass is kind of filtered. Now I believe at some point I still use that over here, for example. You can hear that for the bass notes over here, it's actually being filtered quite hard. And that's just a neat way to do a little fill here. Now, when it comes to all of these complexities, I did do a separate video on them, so I'm not going to go too much in depth on what I'm actually doing here. One of the things to note here is that the production is still very early on and I'm still working on this. This is kind of like one of those slow back burner projects for me. I might finish this in a year, I might finish this in 2 years, who knows? But at some point I'm just going to put myself down and write another segment of drop, and I'm just slowly progressing on this track. And one of the things that I'm planning on doing is carrying over a lot of these complexities to other parts of the track, which currently are a little bit more boring. What I am going to do though is leave a few segments where it's a little bit more structured. So for example, over here we have this very nice groove with also the drop drums happening, and we have all of the sequences already in here. What would probably be nice is have a lot of variations in these parts over here. And then when this segment hits, that it just kind of continues playing and it continues doing its thing for a while without being broken up and glitched up in a way that we see in this part of the track. So the last thing that I want to talk about is recreating kick drums, and the way that I'm going to do that is just by opening up a new version of Audijazz kick drum. I'm just quickly going to move this MIDI clip over here, and our goal is going to be to recreate this kick drum over here. So normally if you're working with a plugin like Kick 2, you can actually show the kick drum in its entirety in here. Unfortunately, Audijazz kick drum does not have that, so we need to work with a different plugin for that. It would be cool to see that implemented in the future, but for now this actually also works. So I'm just going to make my interface as big as it can be. Of course it can be bigger, but then there's no space for the camera and no space for size scope, which we're actually going to be using to monitor over here. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to set one of our sidechain input tracks over here to the kick drum that we're going to be creating. So that is already set. As you can see, this is set over here. And then our reference is going to be over here. You do have to make sure that you set this to post effects over here. That way you can turn this off and you can still listen to things. You can still see that we're getting both layers now. So if I move over to the other one, we still can see the original layer over here. But we can hear that there's a different kick drum playing now. So let's start the recreation process inside of kick drum. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to have it play. And then we'll make the length right. And what you'll see that I'm doing is I'm just trying to match the different waveforms over here. And what is usually a good idea is to zoom in a little bit when it comes to the start here. So we can zoom in over here and we can try to modify these areas over here to get a closer match. I believe in the original kick drum that there's another point over here, so I'm just going to try to emulate that. See if we can get a better result on the transient over here. We're pretty much done with this part over here. I might need to move it a little bit to match over here. Currently, we're not looking at the amplitudes, we're just trying to line up all of the individual peaks over here. So let's zoom in a little bit, holding right mouse track over here, and let's play this. As you can see, we lined up even more stuff over here. So now we zoom in to the very start. And we can line this up as well if we really want the exact same transient. Okay, so now we can worry about the amplitudes and we no longer have to worry about the pitch. So let's zoom out again so that we can get the bigger picture here. And let's move into this part over here. So we can just zoom out and now we can design our kick drum again, in this case from the amplitude. One of the things that we can keep in mind, of course, is that we have this original EQ over here, which we're now also modeling. What we can do is implement that directly on this patch over here. And this is going to change all of the balances that we set up before, so we might need to change that again as well. One of the things that it did do for us is change the phase shift that we have in the beginning here. So we again can try to fix that. For some reason, this one is a little bit more backwards. It may have to do with the specific type of phase shift that is happening over here, but maybe we can use the EQ to change it up a little bit more. Just playing around with the pitch, we're going to get a very close match over here. So let's try a little bit better phase alignment towards the transient here. Now we're getting very, very close. So as you can see, there are some small differences between there, and you can obviously tweak as much as you want. So maybe in this mid-range area over here, we want this to be a little bit louder and a little bit more upfront. And as I said, you can try to get the curve as close as possible to the original, but you can see the idea where we're going for with the creation of kick drums. We're just doing a lot of monitoring at the waveform, and that is how we're going to get a very similar kick sounds to the original, because this is much easier to identifying the actual tonality of the kick drum and try to make something similar without a reference like this. As you can imagine, with a waveform that you can compare and you can see exactly what is happening with all of the notes that are moving, it is much easier to experiment and to see which exact shape you can come up with for the pitch. In this case, we actually ended up with a very elegant pitch shape. As you can see, it just sweeps down like this in one nice curve, which is definitely not what the original patch looked like, if I remember correctly. Yeah, as you can see, there's much more of a strange groove over here. But I guess there's multiple roads to Rome, so you can use whatever you want and you can end up with whatever shape that you want. And you can hear that now we have two kick drums that sound very much alike. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and I hope that you learned something. Let me know if you did by leaving a like and making sure that you're subscribed. Also, if you have any suggestions for videos that you would like to see in the future, make sure to comment them down below. Another great way to support the channel is by watching some more of my content, so I'll leave 2 videos up on the screen right now for you to choose from. Just pick one and enjoy, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.